Hi, thanks for joining a new video. Today we review the OPPO Find X8 Ultra. Let's begin. It must be clarified that this device isn't officially distributed in Mexico or anywhere outside China. There, it costs 6,499 yuan, roughly $905, or 17,100 Mexican pesos. It's clear the prices vary significantly here compared to there. So, let's just consider this device as a high-end model, clearly competing with the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Huawei P80 Ultra, offering all the Ultra features you can imagine, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. We already face a significant disadvantage, which is its availability. You might manage to acquire it through importers and similar channels, but the cost will be considerably higher. Additionally, the warranty issue won't be as easily manageable. Therefore, it's not highly recommended to purchase it from non-official sources. Hopefully, OPPO will eventually be encouraged to distribute their models officially. Out of China. Let's begin with the front design. It features OPPO Crystal Shield glass, promising strong screen resistance. The ultra-thin bezels offer a modern look. Its aesthetics are advanced, complemented by aluminum frames that protect the device from falls, enhancing its durability. On the right, we find volume buttons, power button, the camera button, which is styled like an iPhone. We'll discuss it a bit later. Above that, we have the device's bottom has two mics, plus infrared and secondary audio output. On the left, there's an iPhone-style button that when held can turn. On the flashlight, showing an animation on the dynamic island. This button is customizable for actions like sound, vibration, do not disturb, camera, and more. And the customization interface of this button, can you guess which one it looks like? Yes, it's the classic iPhone style. You'll notice that this manufacturer seems to draw a lot of inspiration from the iPhone in several of its design elements. At the bottom, we discover the tray where you can insert two nano SIM cards, followed by two additional microphones, the USB-C port, and finally, the 3-hole grill for the speaker. This device is 8.78 millimeters thick, so it doesn't seem to be as concerned in terms of controlling this element. But what is interesting is that the camera module, although it protrudes from the body in this generation, does protrude as much as in past generations, giving a more streamlined design. The back cover of this model that I have is in white, but it is also available in black and pink. The truth is that design appears minimalist even though it has this large camera module. It features a contour that looks metallic, and at the bottom of this camera module there is an orange dot. This serves as a unique seal of the collaboration with Hasselblad, which is also evident in the placement of the letter H right in the center of this large camera module. The back cover is crafted from glass, and the device comes with IP68 and IP69 ratings. Therefore, it withstands being submerged in water quite effectively. In fact, the manufacturer has included a special underwater mode for the camera, encouraging users to take advantage of this feature in aquatic conditions. This is something that not all manufacturers would suggest. Consequently, it is evident that the device's resistance is exceptionally impressive and reliable. By the way, once you exit the water mode in the purest style of smartwatches, the device will emit a loud sound through its speaker to expel any water from it. Honestly, in terms of design, it's a really nice device. It doesn't overly emphasize being super thin and light, even though it weighs 226 grams. However, it truly feels quite premium, which is exactly what one would expect from an Ultra device. The screen is 6.82 inches with 19.89 ratio. The exact resolution is 1440 x 3168 pixels. Classified as Quad HD, with this it achieves a density of 510 pixels per inch, so you can imagine that all the elements are extremely sharp. Even the smallest text will be very hard to see any pixels even if you bring the screen closer to your eyes. The truth is that this is a very detailed panel with a very good size, and in this case, it uses AMOLED technology to provide us with intense colors and very high contrasts. In this particular case, the manufacturer provides 3 distinct color calibration modes, which are natural, pro, and vivid. Additionally, there is a manual adjustment available for the color temperature, as well as an adaptive tone option. This adaptive tone is meant to automatically adjust the screen's color temperature. However, it often results in a warmer tone than what might be needed. Nevertheless, it's still a screen that appears to be quite interesting overall. It might fall short in brightness, reaching 1600 nits theoretically, but the screen looks very bright to me. It supports HDR content, working together with the advanced Pro XDR technology. HDR technology is not only compatible with the screen, but also with the camera. This means that, for instance, the photos and videos captured with this cell phone will appear absolutely stunning on the screen. It provides more intense lighting in specific parts of the photograph, which helps to achieve a much more realistic and vivid result. And I could also use this HDR in apps like YouTube, Instagram, and Netflix. So, wherever you go, you'll be able to fully utilize this screen technology, which is expected from a device this costly. It supports HDR, Vivid, Dolby Vision, and HLG, offering full support to leverage this technology in almost any app. As for the lower brightness, it will still be quite comfortable, even though it doesn't offer additional dimming options. However, the dimming rate is 2160 Hz, which means if you are particularly sensitive to flicker, it will be virtually unnoticeable here. To wrap up with display details, it features a 120 Hz refresh rate. This is excellent for displaying very fluid movements across the interface and all its elements. Let's discuss the sound quality now. There are stereo speakers, one located at the bottom and another at the top, providing two outputs, both on the headset for calls and on the frame. Honestly, the sound is quite powerful, which is good in that regard. However, it does not have as much sharpness as I would have liked, at least considering that we are talking. About the Ultra model, I think that in this sense it does not get to be so outstanding. In addition, it does not offer us an equalizer available for the speakers, but only for the headphones when you activate the music profile, so definitely, here is an excellent opportunity for improvement that OPPO needs to focus on in order to enhance their device significantly. Let's hear a quick test, but keep in mind it's not like live listening. Through software. Additionally, we discover All Reality Audio, which is similar to Dolby Atmos, but is developed by OPPO. It is exclusive when using headphones. Moreover, there is spatial audio and various sound profiles available through the equalizer. Thankfully, we have the option to set a specific volume for each application individually. This feature is particularly useful if you wish to listen to multiple things at the same time but with different volume levels. As expected, it does not include a headphone jack, but it does include good support for high resolution codecs such as LHDC, aptTX, including the adaptive version, and finally LDKK. If you have headphones with these codecs, if you could enjoy quality audio without the need to connect a cable. We will find 4 microphones around it. Let's listen to a test of them.
Esta es una grabación realizada con el OPPO Find X8 Ultra y sus micrófonos integrados.
The voice is captured with great excellence. Keep in mind that the voice recorder features a directional recording mode, allowing you to use only the microphones located in the upper frame, making it easier to direct towards the specific audio source you wish to record. Additionally, it includes a clear voice mode that cancels noise during calls. Now, let's listen to how the microphones perform in environments with more noise. As you could confirm, the microphones adapt their gain well to avoid distortions, and this kind of thing works well. Finally, for this block, we must talk about the haptic engine. In this case, it is on the X-axis, and it is one of the best we have tested in the category. We had already told you before that OPPO is one of the manufacturers that best leverages these engines in the user interface to make the experience very refined. When you adjust the brightness or the volume using the control center, it sometimes emits a vibration that can be soft and subtle, while at other times it can be stronger. When you reach a stopping point, unfortunately, this is something I cannot fully convey to you through a video. However, believe me, when you hold the device in your hand and use the cell phone, you will perceive a very premium tactile feedback in your hand. It truly is the best we will find in the industry. Of course, another place You might notice this vibration is on the keyboard, which feels very premium. In this case, it's a 602 cubic millimeter motor. Few manufacturers provide this data, so we assume it's one of the strongest because it feels very nice. More like taps on the hand rather than a simple vibration like in budget devices. According to the manufacturer, this engine gives you 72 types of vibration sensations. It is super premium, and in the whole system we find more than 700 types of vibration feedback. That's why I insist that the experience is completely premium. In this sense, it is an aspect that is not always given the value it needs, but there are many other high-end devices that have simpler engines and that do not take advantage of it. On the OPPO system, it really enhances the experience, making it feel very premium. The front camera measures 21 millimeters and features an f2.4 aperture. It also includes autofocus and a resolution of 32 megapixels, allowing you to open the camera quickly. The good news here is that you can utilize this camera button by pressing it twice, and this gesture will function whether the screen is off or on. Additionally, the animation is quite nice to watch. This feature is definitely useful in any situation where you are using the cell phone, providing you with quick access to the camera. You can do this gesture to run the camera with speed. In fact, you could also draw one or with the screen off, although this gesture is turned off by default, and I find it unnecessary considering the incorporation of the dedicated button for the camera. In fact, within the camera settings, you have the ability to adjust the behavior of the quick button. For instance, you can choose not to launch the camera if you experience accidental activations, or you might opt to activate other applications. However, in this case, it primarily involves Chinese applications, given that it's a device that doesn't leave that region. Interestingly, it also offers the option to take a picture immediately after opening the camera, providing even greater agility. Or in this instance, it allows you to set up its behavior while you're using the camera. Personally, I have experienced situations where just by holding the phone, I unexpectedly take accidental photos. Therefore, if you want this button to solely function for opening the camera, you have the option to disable the picture taking feature. Also, don't forget that you can slide over this button to adjust the zoom. Interestingly, for this gesture to be activated, the device needs to be in a horizontal position. This is particularly useful given that when we typically hold the device this way, our finger naturally rests on the sensor, potentially causing accidental activations. Therefore, I find it quite clever that this gesture only functions when the device is in landscape mode. Additionally, as you can observe, the animation is quite appealing and enjoyable to interact with. Now notice that the front camera has an incredibly fast response speed. The shutter reacts swiftly. Holding it down won't trigger a burst, but it doesn't seem like the shutter is extremely fast. It's essential to have such a fast shutter speed. Over on the right side, we will discover several buttons. For instance, one of these buttons enables us to create various lighting effects. However, personally, I dislike the result. It looks like the lens is stained. But that's what OPPO offers here. Additionally, it features several color filters that are quite intriguing, allowing you to preview all of them at once. Moreover, we come across the beauty effects, which offer two distinct settings, natural or classic, or manually. You can adjust each parameter individually. There are many options, so you can fully customize your face to your preference. I also appreciate the exposure compensation button, allowing you to darken the scene without the camera increasing the lighting excessively, or you can do the opposite. We are also going to find an additional option for the live photos feature. As you know, this will save a brief video of the pictures you are taking. Note that you can play it directly from this button, allowing you to relive those moments when you captured the image. Additionally, we will find a special menu where we have the ability to change the image ratio, activate a timer, or also manage the captures in HDR or by intervals. This menu provides more control over your photography settings. Interestingly, this device lets us take high-resolution pictures, ideal for detailed photos. We tested with default settings. For capture, tap the screen or show your palm to activate the shutter. While it doesn't include smile detection, I believe that having palm detection is more than sufficient for comfortable photo captures. Interestingly enough, it also offers a feature for taking ID photos, and then it transforms. Appear as though they were taken in a professional studio setting. In this scenario, there are some recommendations to achieve the best possible result. And as you can see, it can be used with both the rear and front cameras. I'm going to do a test even though it's not the best light condition. See how it's processing that and just wait and see. It automatically blurs the background and frames it so that it looks like a studio photograph. In this case, I took a selfie, but it would be advisable, I insist, to use the rear camera. The front camera seems to have had a very important evolution with respect to the last generation, which was one of its weakest points. The colors look natural, We also find a good level of detail, so overall I think it is a good quality photograph. In this case it offers two levels of zoom at 25 degrees, 25 millimeters, even allows us to apply a little digital zoom 2x in case you want to notice. More details, but with the arm stretched to the maximum, I think you can achieve a very good framing. It must be said that in this case the camera does have autofocus, however it does not support being too close to the camera, but I think that for general use it will be useful to have the autofocus. However, you should know that other devices are going to have better autofocus for the front camera. For backlit photos, the preview looks moderately optimized, and after capturing the photo, it does a very good balance of highlights and shadows. In this case, we have a good result overall, although it is still not its strongest point. Let's say that the selfies are only going to be compliant, but it is not the highlight of this cell phone. Note that at night it retains a good color rendition, although it doesn't have as much detail as in the daytime, obviously. However, it appears to manage the noise quite effectively while maintaining the level of detail. Automatically, the device will activate its screen in an attempt to illuminate your face, although you have the option to disable this lighting based on your preference. Fortunately, it does not seem to distort anything. Too much color rendition, unlike other devices, so it will be especially useful. In this type of backlit night scenes to have a good level of detail. Actually, I find it quite interesting that in this particular case, the photographs indeed appear with a decent level of detail. They may not have as much contrast as one might expect, but I believe they are sufficient. Even the portrait photos taken at night seem to maintain a good quality using this front camera. However, when we switch to daytime photography, we notice that it struggles to keep the objects in the foreground well focused. Additionally, it lacks the level of detail I would have preferred to see. Liked it considering it was a daytime photo, although in this instance it was a cloudy day. However, this is where you can notice that it doesn't possess an aperture that's excessively bright. On the back, we see some key features of this device. Let's talk about the cameras. First, there's the 15mm ultra-wide with f2.0 aperture, autofocus, and a 50 megapixel sensor. Next, the 23mm camera has an f1.8 aperture autofocus, optical stabilization, and a 50 megapixel sensor with a 1-inch size. Next, we have a 70mm lens with f2.1 aperture, bright for this length, featuring autofocus and optical stabilization and a sensor with 50 megapixels. This camera also offers macro at 10 centimeters. Finally, there's a 135mm lens with 3.1 aperture, autofocus, optical stabilization, and a 50 megapixel sensor. In more casual cell phone terms, we have 0.6, 1x, 3x, and 6x lens distances. However, with the manufacturer's various crops, you also get perspectives of 20, 8, 35, 47, 85, and 22.4, up to 300 millimeters. We'll see the picture soon, but really, this will provide us with an experience that thoroughly covers all aspects of the focal lengths. In my opinion, OPPO is the manufacturer that excels in this area and does the job better than others. When it comes to the choice of the camera's focal lengths, however, besides these cameras, there's an additional laser section designed to assist with focusing. Additionally, there's another segment featuring a color camera known as Dancia, with a resolution of 2 megapixels. This color camera plays a vital role in enhancing the precision of color capture. The initial aspect to observe about this camera interface is that it provides us the ability to click on the zoom shortcuts to adjust the focal length. For instance, we can click on 1x and the perspective shifts from 23mm to 28 or 35. Starting at 6, you can alter the perspective to 47 or leap to 70, and from there you have the option to change to 85. Then at 135, you can click again to switch to 200, 24 or 300 millimeters, and even to 600 and so forth. So they serve as quick shortcuts of various focal lengths that prove to be quite useful. He believes it also provides us with an instant capture speed, which is remarkably fast in that regard. Moreover, if we maintain optimism, we can take a burst of photos, which in this scenario could be as many as 50 pictures. Interestingly enough, the device manages a buffer, meaning when you press the shutter, it has already captured the photograph. This way, it will always anticipate the exact moment you press it. Don't worry too much about pressing the exact moment you want it, though it might cause some confusion. For the burst, note that it takes nearly 3/4 of a second to initiate, so it wasn't very effective. We also observed a significant gap between photos at times, but these burst photos should have excellent quality. An intriguing aspect of this manufacturer's camera interface is its inclusion of various fascinating modes. These modes include scene mode, silhouette mode, and fireworks mode, which will accentuate the shadows more than the traditional rendering typically does. This feature offers users a unique experience and often overexposes. You also have manual exposure control if needed. It's useful to have these shortcuts. quickly because in these specific scenarios, the cell phone cameras might become confused. Additionally, we will discover the same lighting effects that we observed for the front camera alongside the color filters that we can preview. Moreover, regarding beauty effects for the rear camera, there is merely a slider located at the top. We also have a button to activate macro mode with the telephoto camera, which works spectacularly. Notice you can be very close and it focuses precisely. In fact, you have two options here: a natural blur or alternatively total clarity if you prefer a more uniform look. This feature comes in very handy, especially for various types of photographs. You can enable this option, which is called the action mode. It proves to be extremely useful for capturing movements. Note that in this instance I'm not under direct sunlight, so the lighting isn't overly intense. I'm going to take a picture with the action mode turned off, and I want you to carefully observe how the sweeping movement turns out. Now let's activate the action mode, and this should clearly be an improvement. Look, here's the result, and it's definitely much better. It doesn't have a full 100% definition. However, it is significantly superior when compared to not using the action mode. This feature proves to be particularly beneficial for capturing small children who are in motion during performances or in various scenarios, as well as other similar situations. The software is indeed very well equipped to handle such tasks. Moreover, if you happen to be in close proximity to an object, you will observe that the macro mode activates automatically. Rest assured, you have the option to disable it if needed. Activate this feature if you prefer using the main camera. However, it's important to note that it might result in a less uniform focus. Ultimately, as a user, you have the choice. You can decide whether you want to disable or enable the automatic macro mode. Now remember, you have the ability to tap on the screen to tweak both the exposure compensation and the focus. You can also lock these settings to prevent any further changes. Additionally, you can switch to this main mode, which provides us with even more options. While you can still utilize the automatic mode, you'll now have the advantage of capturing images in JPEG format. This gives you more flexibility and control over your photography. JPEG Max, RAW, or even RAW Max to capture the maximum possible amount of information for later processing. Here, you will also discover some presets that you can fully customize to suit your preferences. Then it provides quick settings to adjust the interpretation of colors, allowing you to modify them yourself. However, if you're not interested in presets and recommended options, in this scenario, we will also discover the Pro mode. This mode enables us with more input settings, and we will find the ISO, which has the capability to reach up to 12,800, and then there's the shutter speed, which can extend up to 30 seconds. Additionally, there's exposure compensation, a focus and white balance. By the way, I forgot to mention that the RAW Max function allows you to take pictures with 16 bits, providing a lot of information. Additionally, there are more tools available here. For instance, you can enable the histogram, and there's an option for maximum focus. There's also an option for focus magnification, which is particularly useful. When you're adjusting the focus, it will display a section here where you can clearly see the details. It's a broader view of the focus's behavior, whether it's already in focus or not, so it assists with that. I haven't really noticed this feature in cell phones, not even in high-end ones. However, OPPO, which has a close partnership with Hasselblad, appears to be beginning to integrate these types of functions that we typically find in devices solely dedicated to photography. For smart settings, when scanning text or documents, a T button appears to extract text digitally, so you have the option to select the scanner and copy it to another application or something similar. However, it doesn't directly scan the document. To do that, we need to switch to the document scanner mode, which in this instance is optimized by Brino. Globally, we do not perceive it in that manner. Once more, it demonstrates how OPPO in China possesses many more capabilities, which are overshadowed globally in favor of Google. Then, take note of how, in this particular situation, we are going to proceed to scan the document. Now, clearly, I am not positioned in the most ideal spot, but anyway, let's go ahead and click this button. This will allow us to see how we can keep adding more pages, which is already a good thing. But that's not all. Once you have completed the scanning process, we will also discover options to straighten the document. Rotate it, recognize the text, apply some color filters or even an option to focus and add more detail to it. You can additionally eliminate glare or reflections that are being created, as well as remove texture or shadows, particularly if they have been caused by positioning the cell phone over the document. It offers excellent options, and even it not only includes the traditional document scanner, but it also offers a feature to extract tables. Additionally, there's another option to renew tests, which I am not entirely sure about its specific purpose, but it is quite intriguing. In fact, it also has the capability to recognize formulas, scan codes, identify text, or even detect objects. Then, as you begin to realize, I believe it is an excellent option. Now, certainly in China, it will be much more optimized on a global scale. I truly think that. That's why they avoid adding these features, as it may affect performance, but I like it. I wish OPPO would include its camera and smart scanner features on global devices rather than just Google Lens. And finally, regarding QR codes, be aware that it will also have the ability to detect them. However, interestingly, this feature is initially turned off within the settings. Therefore, you will need to manually enable this option directly here in the settings. Once you have enabled the option, you can begin the recognition process. Although, interestingly, it seems to be experiencing some difficulties at the moment in recognizing the code properly. And finally we have it, but let's see the results of all this tremendous photographic system, since in this case OPPO, as I anticipated, you handles different focal lengths to continue to maintain good quality, and in this case you are seeing the photograph with the ultra-wide camera, but it really is of a very good quality. In this case, I think it can perfectly compete against photographs of other devices with its main camera. And now you are looking at the 23mm camera, which is often considered the main camera. However, OPPO doesn't prefer to label it as such, because OPPO asserts that all their cameras are main cameras. They all receive excellent treatment, and I believe they are correct in this assertion. For instance, observe that this very camera offers you the 28mm perspective, which is slightly closer, yet it still maintains excellent quality. Then there is the 35mm perspective, once again preserving a very high level of detail. Just take a look at this camera to see what I mean. How we observe the intricate details of the net and various other elements, so if you're a fan of 35mm photography, this device truly excels in that aspect. In fact, you can actually configure this focal length to be the default setting from the options. Now take a look at the 47mm photo. It uses 2x digital zoom once again. We are still discussing a remarkably good quality, even though it's digital zoom. The level of detail is truly spectacular, revealing even the most distant areas, with zoom detail that is far superior to what we might typically expect. Now you are viewing the 70mm photograph taken with the intermediate telephoto lens. Observe that it again displays an excellent level of detail. In this instance, we are referring to optical zoom, so it's no surprise that we can see this lens offers excellent sharpness and maintains a color rendition that is quite similar to previous photographs we have taken. In addition, this lens provides us with the 85mm perspective while still maintaining a high level of detail. Therefore, the camera is expected to perform exceptionally well. When using various focal lengths, it will provide you with outstanding quality. For instance, now we switch to the maximum telephoto lens, which is 135mm. Once more, we are discussing optical zoom, meaning we will achieve a level of detail that is truly remarkable and simply spectacular. The textures visible in these sheets are really impressive. The truth is that the quality provided by this device across its entire range of focal lengths is remarkably good. In fact, even at 300mm, we can still observe an excellent level of quality. Even though it is a digital observation, it appears similar to optical zoom, as you can see a truly impressive level of detail. In this particular case, we are discussing a photograph taken with good lighting conditions. The result is definitely exceptional. Even when extending to 668mm, which equates to 30x digital zoom, the quality remains excellent. Although you might start to notice a slightly blurred background or similar effects, generally speaking. I have always maintained that 30x is the point where I believe the zoom quality is at its peak, that you typically use in everyday life. But well, let's see another carousel of pictures from the ultra-wide camera passing by. Here are the various focal lengths that this device offers, allowing us to observe them so that you can see them for yourself. The incredible level of detail provided by this photographic system is truly spectacular. In this specific case, we are reaching a focal length of 300mm, and it's important to note that it resembles optical zoom. It's amazing to witness how it can cover such a wide range of focal lengths while maintaining optical quality. This capability is quite impressive. Here we're looking at 30x, and this is where I'm telling you it starts, to apply a little bit more artificial intelligence optimization. So, for example, if you focus on an area of well-defined letters or lines, it's going to mark them well. In some cases, it might look a little bit artificial. In other cases, it might improve the detail. So, beyond 30x, if you're going to depend a lot on how well the artificial intelligence optimizes it, for example, when there is a face present, you're going to notice that the artificial intelligence doesn't apply too much optimization in order not to distort or somehow invent the face. So notice that at all these focal lengths, we're still getting a good level of detail. I think that up to 300mm, the level of detail is totally optical, which is already very positive. But as I say, from 30x onwards, you depend a little more on the artificial intelligence. In this case, I think it still does a very good job. Work. And beyond that, when a face is present, it doesn't apply as much artificial intelligence optimization. So here at maximum zoom, we obviously lose a lot of detail. That's why I'm saying that up to 30x is the zoom level where I consider the quality to still be good. That's precisely the distance where it's typically the maximum you'll use in real-life situations. So, the camera is indeed extremely useful, incredibly versatile, and highly functional. However, as I mentioned earlier, if there are no faces present, the device actually possesses excellent capabilities for optimizing detail levels. Observe how in this situation we're progressively getting nearer and nearer, and the device continues optimizing the image. Therefore, I totally believe that this device offers us a remarkable level of versatility. Here, for instance, you have a photograph taken with 205mm, and it truly looks spectacular. It's quite amazing to capture such pictures using just a cell phone. In fact, we even attempt to get a bit closer with this exaggerated zoom, and if we manage to distinguish the airline, it's remarkable. And no, this isn't a commercial, however. It does look quite interesting under backlit conditions. The preview appears to be really good. Take note that the ultra-wide camera performs exceptionally well, as it manages chromatic aberration effectively. It is primarily noticeable only in white color. There are certain areas where you can still notice some pink pigmentation. Given that it was a cloudy day, I believe the quality of the pictures is quite impressive. We observe a nice balance between highlights and shadows. Now, take a look at the outcome we achieved with the main camera. We notice another. Great work. And again, we'll find various focal length options, all maintaining very good performance, with great detail and superb backlight work. Watch. This is a 300mm photo, and it looks brutal, creating a natural blur effect through the lens, so we'll soon see what you might use as a portrait camera without needing to switch to portrait mode, making it an excellent choice for taking photos at night. The ultra-wide camera performs excellently. When it comes to photography, the result is a remarkably clean photograph that maintains a high level of detail, although it might not perfectly balance the areas where illumination emission occurs, especially if these areas are very small. It's not a significant issue. The photograph still looks excellent. The main camera enhances the image even further, allowing us to achieve an even higher level of detail, which is quite impressive. We do not observe any noise, resulting in a very clean photograph with vibrant and accurate colors. Taking pictures with this cell phone is very rewarding even at night. And the same thing is going to happen with the rest of the lenses. 70% M&M also gives us good quality, 85. M&M also, 135 also, and notice in this case, for example, we are talking about 10x digital zoom, and really keeps very well the texture of the wall, the texture of the leaves, confirming that it is a brutal device even for night photography. And is that in this case, OPPO has improved the aperture of its telephoto lens, so here you are seeing some other photographs, and in the 70mm lens we now have aperture f2.1, which allows us to have a greater entry of light. However, in this instance, the night mode might exaggerate the light entry. This scene in reality appeared much darker, yet on the cell phone it is excessively brightened. Of course, you could simply disable the night mode and it would be ready. This adjustment fixes the result, making it look very realistic and quite nice, while still maintaining a great experience. Clean in photography, although there is some artifacting present in the darker areas. However, considering the level of difficulty that this type of photography represented, it is actually quite acceptable. Then just note that in the darker areas, it could become overdone in terms of light ingress. The 135mm lens has now moved to an f3.1 aperture, which despite not being very bright, is brighter than the last generation, which was f4.1, and so many. Actually, the previous generation did not utilize this lens in extremely dark conditions, but this time you have the opportunity to use it. I am really impressed that even in such dim scenarios, you can capture high-quality photos with zoom. Now, for instance, this would be 10x zoom, and it looks absolutely spectacular. Turning off the night mode would make it appear even more realistic. For example, take a look at this other photograph I captured with a focal length of 199.9mm. As you come to realize, we are discussing a scenario where there is typically a combination of lights and shadows that makes photography quite complex. However, in this particular case, the device has once again performed exceptionally well, thanks to the brighter aperture they have incorporated. Therefore, it's truly a device that you can thoroughly enjoy using for this type of photography in a wide variety of scenarios. And by the way, I completely forgot to show you the panoramic photography feature. I believe this is one particular aspect where the device definitely needs improvement because its panoramic pictures lack high resolution. This is quite disappointing, especially on a device that isn't very good overall. It truly features an impressive photographic system. Additionally, it excels in macro photography too. It does an excellent job. In this case, for example, you're looking at the picture with the ultra-wide camera, which is automatically selected when you have a very small object. This will be about as close as you can get using the main camera, so you're more or less getting a sense of the size of this object we're planning to photograph. However, even with the main camera, despite the fact that it doesn't permit us to get extremely close, it still provides us with excellent detail. And naturally, since we have the ability to use several different focal lengths when taking these pictures, with the main camera, we are able to get even closer than before. Though it's digital zoom, I already mentioned that the detail is excellent. The 70mm camera also has tele-macro capabilities, allowing it to focus on small objects, making macro photography with this device outstanding. It will also be spectacular. And if you apply a little bit more zoom, it's not going to use the maximum telephoto camera, but with the intermediate telephoto camera. If it's able to give us excellent macro photography from very close, just so you have a reference, there's a finger there. So in this instance, I believe you can more clearly see just how small that object was. When it comes to moving pictures, take note that the device will perform adequately. In this particular scenario, we did not activate action mode, yet the movements still appear with sufficient definition. It was a cloudy day, which might be why you can detect a slight sweep. However, it's honestly not too bad at all. Take note, for instance, that with the main camera, this issue did not occur. The motion capture is highly accurate, even without causing any distortions in these movements. However, with the 2x crop, you will begin to notice some distortions, making it less advisable to take pictures using digital zoom when there is significant movement occurring. However, in 70mm, a very slight distortion can also be generated, but it's not really very noticeable. It still performs well even without swept pictures. Yet the 135mm camera with its f3.1 aperture, however, it might suffer a bit more, which is completely natural. So with the higher zoom camera, it is going to be essential that you activate the action mode in case you are going to take these kind of pictures. In fact, here if we turn on action mode and see how with the ultra wide camera we're going to see good definition. The main camera had already shown us good definition, but even with the 45 setting we can still see good definition. The camera's image quality is quite good, however, when you turn on the action mode, it significantly improves, effectively avoiding distortion, blurring, and similar issues. That's the reason why I strongly emphasize that OPPO carefully considers everything to provide you with all the modes you might need. Action mode is yet another example of this thoughtful design. The device also enables us to capture high-resolution photos with any of the lenses, because we have 50 megapixels on all of the sensors. This means that from the ultra-wide camera, we can already observe excellent capabilities too. Crop the image and extract a portion from the center, which still looks very impressive. The main camera will also possess these very same capabilities. Notice the incredible level of detail it provides when we zoom in on the image just a bit. The middle telephoto camera follows the same formula and maintains the quality. Look at the textures it can achieve with this 50 megapixel resolution, and the maximum telephoto camera once again is exactly the same. It's truly impressive the level of detail that these cameras offer us. Let's wrap up by examining some portrait photographs. I believe you will come to the conclusion yourself that this is truly a spectacular device in every possible way. The depth detection is really impressive as it effectively distinguishes between the foreground and the background, applying a beautifully natural bokeh effect to the background from various focal lengths. This feature is going to provide us with outstanding quality for portrait photography. Interestingly, when using portrait mode, it seems to apply some facial retouching that isn't present when you're not using portrait mode. Therefore, I would like the picture to appear somewhat more natural in that regard. However, as I had already mentioned to you, this device will even enable us to take portrait photos without needing the portrait mode. Right from the start, the fact that it provides us with the 135mm for portrait photography offers a highly professional perspective that is seldom found in smartphones. Now observe how the photos appear without using the portrait mode, but by utilizing the 70mm lens, it already applies this complete blur effect. The natural background and facial details are visible without retouching, as if in portrait mode. So it looks really great even when it's at 85mm. And then finally, when you look at 135mm, notice how it still maintains this natural blur effect for the background. This will likely help quite a bit when you're using portrait mode to get good detection. However, whether or not you decide to use portrait mode, you can still capture very nice portrait shots as long as the background is far enough away from the main subject you're focusing on. The device records video well, reaching 4K at 120 FPS. For slow motion with the main, intermediate and periscope telephoto cameras, other cameras lack this, but the entire kit records up to 4K at 60 FPS, offering excellent video quality. At the device, it will provide numerous software features. Firstly, there's exposure compensation, crucial for lighting control. Next, we have ultra steady mode and Dolby Vision recording, both very professional. At the bottom, there's a button for color filters, though they're not compatible with 4K, similar to the face retouching mode. I believe these options definitely be enhanced in a future update. However, it's important to note that at the time we begin the video recording, we will have a convenient and user-friendly slider to control the zoom, along with a button to capture photos, another button to pause and resume the recording, another button to turn on the flashlight, and then a final button to activate noise cancellation. The only additional thing that would be needed is to rotate the front-facing camera, which that is something we still don't have the possibility to do on this brand's devices. We'll discover scenery and fireworks profiles much like those in the photographs, making it quite useful. Among the additional modes, there's Video Pro, which, besides what I mentioned, lets us manually adjust the ISO up to 12,800. The camera lets us adjust shutter speed, compensation, focus, and white balance. And notably, even during recording, we can tweak these settings, adding an appealing and interesting touch. There's a button here to hide the interface, keeping it out of the way. At the top, we have a histogram monitor and an audio level monitor. Interestingly, unlike Samsung, it doesn't allow for professional audio input changes. However, it lets us record in a log format for advanced and professional color grading in post-production. It's important to note that in this particular case, it doesn't include any option for adding color directly to the video on your cell phone. For this purpose, we will need professional software. Additionally, the video settings provide the ability to lock the lenses, preventing any changes during recording. This is particularly useful if you are very professional and prefer to use only one specific lens. Furthermore, you have the option to lock the white balance and choose whether or not you want to have. The frames per second rate is designed to adjust according to the light levels available, which is quite beneficial. However, if you prefer it to remain constant without any fluctuations, you have the option to set it to a fixed rate. To begin, here is a demonstration of the recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. Please remember that this was on a day that was a bit overcast, lacking much direct sunlight, which is why it appears somewhat darker compared to the majority of the tests that only do in the channel. But in general, here you get an idea of the capabilities that can get to have this device, because with any of the cameras allows us to make this recording, although in this case the digital zoom, for example 2x, does not maintain the same optical quality that if we see in the photograph. That would be a pending issue in the future. But in general, also by jumping between the different lenses that brings on the back, we can maintain this same recording quality. The device even allows us to record in K to 120 frames per second, which would allow us to have a kind of slow motion, and not only can do it with the main camera, but also with the telephoto, so you can convert these videos to slow motion. It's truly spectacular that even with the 6x zoom periscope camera, you can achieve such high-level recording quality. However, in most cases, you'll be recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, which is the resolution you're currently viewing. The ultra-wide camera appears fine to me, although you might notice slightly less detail when compared to the main camera. Let me remind you that this was a rather complicated environment with a combination of interesting lights and extremely pronounced shadows because of the cloudy weather conditions. Here you see how it switches lenses and recovers detail well, plus we expect good stabilization. So, for video, it should perform well. Notice how in backlit conditions, the ultra-wide camera isn't so spectacular. In my opinion, the ultra-wide camera has the lowest quality when it comes to video recording. This is primarily due to the fact that the colors appear somewhat oversaturated, lacking the natural representation that the main camera provides. However, when we focus on how it handles backlight, I must say they do a great job. There are no noticeable aggressive changes when the camera detects or fails to detect a face, which is quite impressive. Even when using these digital zoom settings, we are still going to have a similar experience. Notice how switching over to the 3x lens provides an excellent level of detail with superb light and shadow handling. Even when using the 6x periscope camera, it manages to maintain this good backlit video recording feel, so it definitely performs exceptionally well. Now, take a look at night, as the ultra-wide camera seems to control noise effectively enough. In this sense, it doesn't disappoint like some other devices. I think it manages to have a good quality considering the level of darkness we were in, although it is not able to properly illuminate the most illuminated areas as if we saw it in the picture. But this is something very common in videos recorded from cell phones. We still don't see something as spectacular as we do in the photograph. And nevertheless, it has a decent light input. By changing the main camera, it clearly enhances the level of detail even further, because we no longer need to contend with so much noise. In scenarios with better lighting, we will obtain a very sharp image with natural colors. There aren't any aggressive changes in the white balance or anything similar. However, it still does not correctly expose the most illuminated areas, which remains another issue to address. Even when capturing darker areas, the camera will still scenarios behaves very well. With the intermediate zoom, we again see very similar behavior, although if lights are present, it seems that it will struggle a bit more to handle a good dynamic range at night. If a light is no longer present in the frame, it's going to turn up the illumination input quite a bit to capture the details of the darker area as well. But if there is an illumination inside the frame, it could darken the rest, and the same will happen with the periscope camera. Night recording is the most complex scenario for a camera, especially in certain conditions. In this backlit nighttime scene, future generations could still improve it, but for now, it performs very well, especially in the darkest scenarios without a light source. If you use the maximum telephoto lens, notice here I'm doing a little switch between digital zoom, then the intermediate telephoto camera, then again digital zoom, and finally the maximum telephoto camera, which I insist is already quite outstanding that in this scenario. It's so dark that if you use this camera, you'll need to try hard to capture as much detail as possible. And however, I decided to conduct another backlight test by moving a bit closer to the light source. In this scenario, it still struggles to fully balance 100% of this area. Thus, it appears to be outdone by Huawei and its capabilities with the pure A8 Ultra. Additionally, since the cameras are positioned behind the same glass, they can produce these quite bothersome reflections. Notice how I use my hand to cover and prevent these reflections, thereby enhancing contrast. Then the fact that all the cameras are positioned behind glass might hinder performance in this aspect. Additionally, at night it lacks the dynamic range that is as spectacular as what we have observed in the Huawei Pura A8 Ultra. When it comes to stabilization, see what we achieved with the ultra-wide camera. It offers excellent stability while walking or running. The main camera provides the same stability when walking. You can feel it. A stable movement. You don't notice sudden compensating movements or anything like it. And even when you are running, it continues to provide a comfortable sensation, ensuring that there isn't too much bounce generated. However, take a look at how we can simultaneously walk and record using this telephoto camera. You won't notice abrupt movements. Of course, we won't be running with the telephoto camera, but even when using the maximum telephoto zoom while walking, it manages to control the movements effectively. Although the stabilization is already quite impressive, it also provides us with the ultra steady mode, which assists in regulating the camera's movements, resulting in a higher quality shot. When it comes to higher intensity movements, especially during action scenes, this feature can be incredibly useful. It allows you to switch to the main camera while still being in this ultra steady mode, even as you are recording. Moreover, we can utilize the telephoto lens while recording in this ultra steady mode, which enables us to capture shots of very high quality, even with movement. And it's the same when you record with a 6x lens. The video recording will be absolutely outstanding even in these challenging scenarios, like when you're walking around and similar situations. This is especially true because it maintains 4K quality even when you enable the super stable mode. Regarding the handling of the zoom, notice how you can observe the change between one lens and another due to the increasing quality and the level of detail. Unlike photography, where the digital zoom maintained almost 100% of optical quality, in this case the maximum it allows us to reach is 30x of digital zoom. As I mentioned, this will generally be the maximum you will use in real-life situations. I like the video zoom, but wish it kept more detail in digital zoom. In the picture, observe how the focus will also shift with excellent quality. It's quick and it's precise. However, the main camera isn't capable of focusing from extremely close distances, so you'll need to be aware of that. Despite this, the focus performs efficiently. Let me remind you that the ultra-wide camera is equipped with autofocus, enabling us to get slightly closer, and it functions correctly as well. The intermediate telephoto camera, which even includes telemacro capabilities, might have the slowest focusing. This is due to the extensive travel it must undertake to focus accurately because of its telemacro features. Meanwhile, the Periscope 6X doesn't focus well from very close distances, making it challenging to test, but it performs adequately. Now, regarding the portrait recording mode, I must say I'm not fond of the fact that it records in full HD. I believe that considering the capabilities the device offers, we should indeed expect 4K resolution. Therefore, for videos aiming to achieve a more professional appearance, we might not experience the optimal quality. In fact, there was a moment when the blur effect was turned off. Thankfully, its intensity can be adjusted based on distance and it successfully maintains a sharp focus on objects in the foreground. So, while the performance itself is quite good, it unfortunately doesn't enable us to have 4K video. On the positive side, it does allow us to zoom in slightly while recording in this format, which provides a telephoto perspective. However, I must say I wouldn't personally use the portrait recording mode, since recording with the intermediate telephoto lens already demonstrates the result that we could achieve. The blur effect appears completely natural. We will observe that it either intensifies or reduces naturally based on the distance. Objects remain perfectly in focus at 100% because we are dealing with a natural blur effect. This is why I suggest recording in this mode or even using the 6x lens if there is significant distance variation from the background. Therefore, the recording experience will undoubtedly be exceptional in this regard. Note that if you wish to use the telephoto lens, photo maximum if you need excellent lighting to keep detail high. For the fast camera, 4K with stabilization is good. Its basic speed is 15x, which may be too fast for people, but it has a great bit rate for detail. You could even go up to 1920x for recording plant growth or complex things. In this instance, observe carefully how we capture the movement of the clouds. This process ensures that the recording maintains an exceptionally high quality, allowing you to appreciate every detail. This way, recording the video with this cell phone. So when it comes to landscapes with static scenes, the device is truly spectacular. For the slow motion feature, I had previously mentioned that you can record in 4K at 120 frames per second, but I just want to clarify which you are able to do in both the normal video, which will be recorded at 120 frames per second, as well as in slow motion mode, which will record the file at 30 frames per second, but with the slowness of 120 frames per second. A minor detail you should know. You can record in full HD at 240 frames per second for slower motion, sacrificing some detail, but the image remains good. Appears to have good quality with this configuration. Finally, you have the option to increase up to 480 frames per second for even slower motion, but this requires sacrificing more resolution, achieving only HD. Therefore, this mode is best suited for basic content on social networks rather than for more professional applications. Look at the quality that we will have recording in 4K at 60 frames per second with the front camera. It definitely achieves very fluidity in this sense, meets what one would expect from an Ultra device. Now you're looking at a more traditional 4K format at 30 frames per second, so you can see that it has good stabilization. We already saw that. It has a good level of detail, but even when walking around, you see that. Here, we still see a good feeling, and on this cloudy day is also perceived. The backlight quality is good, at least at basic levels, and something curious is that it allows us to adjust the angle to have the most open angle. The camera can also be used for digital zoom. However, keep in mind that in situations where there is more intense backlighting, it will tend to overexpose the more brightly lit rear areas. This is something that did not occur with the rear camera. Therefore, you can still see that this device is not as capable with its front camera, especially when it comes to recording videos at night. It's important to note that this camera will also present some challenges due to its aperture. Since it isn't a particularly bright camera, there are certain limitations. To reduce noise as much as possible, some texture details might be lost. When you look at darker areas, you'll observe a noticeable flickering effect, which is the camera's attempt to reduce noise. Thus, in very low light environments, this camera isn't as competitive as others that are designed for such conditions. It seems that OPPO gives priority to having a wider camera. However, it sacrifices brightness. Additionally, we will find the fast camera mode available with the same settings we have previously seen for the rear camera. Although it is interesting that it does not include a slow motion mode for the front camera. Although recording at 60 frames per second, you could have a kind of slow motion. Now you're looking at portrait mode with this front camera, which also may not be in 8K, but I think it does apply a nice enough blur effect to the background, but unfortunately it's in full HD and not 8K as we would have liked on an Ultra device. Fortunately, it does seem to keep the foreground objects in focus, and that behavior is really good, but the fact that it is not K, come on, many points. And finally, it has different dual recording modes, although in this case it looks a bit low level of detail as it considers that the video will be recorded in full HD, which again in the price range can be disappointing. Consider that you have the ability to move the small box to the position you desire, although there is a slight restriction when moving to the right. Fortunately, the autofocus remains enabled and you can also apply zoom. However, it is important to note that it won't dynamically switch between the different rear cameras. And here, we are specifically talking about digital zoom. To be precise, you can achieve up to 10 times digital zoom within this mode. Interestingly, if you want to rotate the cameras, you must first stop recording and then begin it again, which is quite an unusual behavior. Additionally, we will discover a circular mode for this picture-in-picture, a feature exhibiting exactly the same behavior I previously mentioned. Lastly, there is the split screen mode, which divides the screen completely in half, and it also shares the same behavior we observed earlier. I would have preferred if we had the ability to switch between the various rear cameras. In this situation, even if you stop the recording and begin it once more, you still can't use the intermediate telephoto camera or the maximum telephoto camera. I believe that this dual recording mode in particular needs enhancement because it seems quite basic and comparable to the level of a mid-range device. Within the software, we will discover Android 15 and Color OS 15. This OPPO operating system is truly refined aesthetically. It's a stable system that is very well developed. Although we don't see a specific software update policy since it's a high-end device, it is expected to have a good one. Now, let me share some features we encountered. To begin with, the customization options for the lock screen are quite impressive. In fact, the manufacturer provides what it refers to as flow themes, offering different templates for you to use. This results in a wide variety of choices available. Additionally, the device has the capability to detect depth, allowing the main subject of the photograph to appear in front of the clock, for example. A small detail which, by the way, drew inspiration from the iPhone, but OPPO has managed to implement it quite effectively and impressively. Or, you have other styles and effects for your wallpaper to the image you have set as your wallpaper. If it was behind glass or with ripple or water effects, the truth is they appear really nice because you can customize this lock screen extensively. We will even have the option to tweak the clock's typography, its size, thickness, and add a bit more information to the screen. Additionally, the device features always on display with various covers. In fact, there's also a store available where you can download even more covers. Although you can access it from China, the key point here is that it does indeed work effectively. As an always-on display mode offering 3 different modes available, the power-saving mode will not be constantly active as you also have the option of a scheduled mode. This allows you to assign just a single time slot for the display to be active, where the screen stays on, or the final option to keep it completely on, though it will clearly use more power all day long. It has 2 modes. Fluid connects to the lock screen for transition. Extremely good and pleasant or traditional, it will just show a totally different clock on the screen. Always on display and a separate one for the lock screen. Here, you can set a background photo for always on display like on the iPhone, but there's a store with various covers to download, including nature, art, and more. In the home screen settings, you also have available the traditional gesture to pull down the icons and have them at your fingertips. The transition is quite nice and allows a comfortable use of the cell phone with one hand, although speaking of this, when you activate the one-handed use mode only reduces the screen on the vertical axis, so it does not reduce the entire screen, and this personally does not please me. The quick settings panel can be divided into 2 pages or can be all the controls on one page. In fact, here it also shows you the devices you have linked to yourself. Phone, and there is an option that OPPO calls as live alerts, which is a graphic element that appears on the outline of the camera and it's cut out of the screen. There are several Chinese apps that support this that we obviously don't care about. They do not interest too much globally, but also the music player could show its controls there, although we are talking about the native player. It's interesting to note that YouTube Music isn't supported, whereas Spotify is. Thus, you can have those quick shortcuts right here to check out. Additionally, animations will show up in this section when you are sharing your internet connection or recording your screen. You'll also see some health data or game timers. In essence, there are many system animations that can be shown in this area. However, these are not utilized by other global applications. They are exclusive to Chinese applications. The device comes equipped with the classic OPPO Smart Sidebar, designed to provide a variety of features. For instance, it intelligently offers different suggestions based on your current situation. If you happen to be in a different country, it will automatically prompt you. To access the roaming function, which we will discuss in more detail shortly. Additionally, when using the internet browser, it provides artificial intelligence-driven suggestions to enhance your navigation experience, and it will continue to suggest other useful things in this manner. Following this, we move on to the files section. Here, we gain access to a temporary storage space, which functions like an intelligent clipboard. Additionally, you can access your recent files, enabling you to easily drag and drop from this sidebar to various elements like WhatsApp or Gmail, for instance. After this, we will explore additional tools such as screen capture and screen recording, among other features. Finally, we'll see the opening of applications that will run in a floating mode with just a single touch. Interestingly, in this case, we can only have one app open at a time in floating mode, so OPPO is not one of the manufacturers that lets you open lots and lots of applications at the same time on the screen. By the way, this smart sidebar, you can customize it to remove some of the elements that I was mentioning and even remove the names of the applications to have a much more simplified view. But the truth is that it is a pretty useful bar that allows you to quickly access various functions. However, when you use floating windows with split screen, you can have up to 3 apps open simultaneously. By the way, both Instagram and YouTube support this floating window mode. As always, you can swipe 3 fingers down for scrolling screenshots or hold 3 fingers on the screen for a partial screenshot if you only want a section of your screen. One interesting aspect is that the device might attempt to automatically recognize private information to censor it before sharing. For instance, in a WhatsApp conversation, you could easily enable or disable censorship of specific content with just a couple of taps, which proves to be quite useful. Additionally, we discovered various gestures to control the cell phone, like drawing certain letters with the screen off or using symbols to directly open specific applications. It also has the newly designed Zen Space also offers an excellent way to manage calls, allowing you to easily answer or mute them just by placing your finger on the phone. This is useful if, for example, you are eating and simply do not want to touch your cell phone. It also has a retouching option for video calls, but only compatible with Chinese applications and the traditional Zen Space to disconnect from digital life, avoid being flooded with so many notifications, and you can set the time your session will last. Finally, when we are in the gallery, we will discover some great options. The traditional method of extracting images involves holding down on an element of the image. You can then drag it to temporary storage or even to the device's artificial internet assistant. Alternatively, you can save it in the sticker library of the photo editor. Additionally, if there is text within the photos, you can hold down to extract that text in a digital format. This makes it easier to manage and use the content in various ways. Within the settings, you also have the option to enable editing suggestions, powered by artificial intelligence, which the device can provide. Additionally, something quite unique that I haven't encountered on other devices is its card album feature. This option automatically identifies photos you take of items like your IDs, bank cards, tickets, and more, then stores them in a separate album. This adds an intriguing element to the gallery experience as well. Regarding AI functions, it's tricky since this Chinese device uses OPPO's Brino assistant. Globally, OPPO opts for Google's developments instead, but I'd like to see Brino globally to compete with Gemini. From the configuration, it's a Gemini-style assistant with a lot of intelligence that offers proactive suggestions, connects to Chinese services, recognizes images, stores memories, makes summaries, categorizes graphics for quick searches, making it interesting. OPPO provides editor, search, and transcription functions. However, these tools differ from global ones. In fact, there is another feature known as EZP that lets you rotate the device to display your QR code for payments. This is a very common practice in China. However, there are 3 functions that we have not yet observed on a global scale, and I believe they might be implemented in the near future. To begin with, we have the Recompose with AI function, which is designed to assist us in altering the framing of our photographs. This is achieved through an artificial intelligence system that has been extensively trained using professionally designed photographs. Therefore, even if you lack extensive experience in photography, you can simply press this option, and the artificial intelligence will automatically adjust and place the picture within the frame for you. You can also try to frame the characters in a different way to make it much more professional. Composition includes a feature known as Perfect Shot, which enables you to swap out the faces of individuals in your photos. After learning the face from other images, it doesn't have to be a photo from the same location. It could be taken in a different room at night or during the day. You can experiment with changing facial expressions through multiple touches in a very beneficial manner. And also another option that we had not seen is the focus, which basically allows us to gain sharpness in photos that have been slightly swept. This, in addition to the eraser of objects, improved clarity and the option to remove flashes that we had already known. Hopefully all these features will also reach the global versions. Let's now delve into the topic of security. In this particular case, it features an ultrasonic fingerprint reader, which is exactly what one would anticipate from an Ultra device. This means it doesn't emit any light, making it non-intrusive and not annoying at all. It recognizes fingerprints extremely quickly. In fact, since it's integrated under the screen, there's also the option to change the animation to select your favorite style. Additionally, it has a quick launch option, allowing you to move your finger to an icon without lifting it, providing you with rapid access to your desired functions. It additionally features facial recognition, although it's only in D, so it's not very advanced. Furthermore, it includes the smart lock option, which allows the device to identify trusted devices or locations. It can even sense if you're holding it for an extended period, enabling it to remain unlocked in these environments and eliminating the need to repeatedly enter the PIN or pattern. This essentially replicates Google's extended unlock feature, but here it is implemented with OPPO's unique approach. Additionally, we will locate the application lock, which allows you to request a code or pattern once more before granting access to specific applications. And moreover, you have the option to conceal applications from the main screen. And you can also enter a private safe where you can securely store various types of content that you prefer to keep hidden from others. Furthermore, it features the application cloner, enabling you to manage 2 separate accounts on the same mobile device. In this case, it not only allows you to clone messaging or social apps, but also any app. Or if that's not enough, you can clone the entire system, making it seem like you have 12 phones in one, each space with its own apps, accounts, and files. This can be useful for separating work from personal life. We also discovered the kids space, which is handy for safely letting a child use the phone. In this kids mode, you have the ability to select which applications you want to make available for the child. Additionally, you can decide if you want to establish time limits for each session they use the device. Furthermore, you have the option to set up alerts that notify the child when they are using the device in poorly lit environments or if they are sitting with bad posture. It also alerts them if they are watching the screen from a very close distance. Moreover, you can choose to automatically enable the blue light filter to protect their eyes. It provides everything necessary for kids to enjoy a positive cell phone experience with effective controls. Additionally, it features a self-developed antivirus to combat malware. Unlike the Chinese version, it doesn't include collaborations with Avast or Avira. It also offers a protection feature. Privacy protection that could prevent some apps from trying to get too much data about you. That is, applications requesting access to your contacts, call log, or text messages might end up receiving just an empty list instead. If you enable this option, you can enable it individually for each application. It also includes the repair mode to block all the content of your cell phone when you take it to a workshop. And something I had not seen in other cell phones is that it brings an option to protect the screen when you have the option to share screen, i.e., there are some applications that you can enable that appear completely blank. When you have the screen sharing feature enabled, it serves to prevent those who are viewing your screen through chats or other similar methods from seeing the content you are sharing. You could also choose to block notifications. It's quite interesting indeed. Being a Chinese version, it doesn't come with a complete suite of options developed by Google. However, as you observed, it has its own version of Smart Lock. It also includes its own Find Device network, its very own password manager, as well as its own implementation of digital wellness and family care. I don't know why OPPO drops its services for Google's globally. I prefer the Chinese version over the global one. Now let's discuss the battery, which boasts a capacity of 6,100 mAh. While this number might seem impressive at first glance, the actual performance is somewhat disappointing. In the close-up drain test, it only managed to last 4 hours and 22 minutes. This is practically the same result as a device with a 5,000 mAh battery, indicating that it doesn't really have a remarkable battery life. However, there's a silver lining. In the background drain test, we observed a significant improvement, with the battery lasting up to 9 hours and 46 minutes. So it is quite evident that the device is indeed capable of effectively managing the power of the applications that are running in the background. And regarding the last test, which involved playing YouTube videos with the screen brightness set at 50%, it impressively lasted for 16 hours and 38 minutes. In fact, when the battery level reached 1%, it automatically switched to ultra power saving mode and there was no way to exit from it. However, to be honest, it did fall short once again in this aspect. Taking into account that some devices with smaller batteries have managed to surpass 18 hours, it appears there isn't a significant level of optimization. For constant use, you will probably require the battery saver mode. Fortunately, it also integrates the ultra saver mode for emergency occasions, which, as I told you, is automatically enabled when only 1% of battery is left. The maximum charging power supported by this device is 100 watts, at least that in theory. The charger that came in the box is 100 watts, but look at the chart. The most it ever used was 63 watts, so we could say it is a 65 or 80 watts charge. So again, the data impresses, but the usage disappoints. But even if it doesn't use the full power of the charger, it will charge quickly. In 15 minutes, it got up to 49%, which is already outstanding. In 30 minutes, it went up to 86%, and the full charge was completed in 39 minutes. So yes, it is a very fast charge, but for some reason, it doesn't go all the way up to 100 watts. It just keeps the power high for longer, unlike other devices that drop the power very quickly. Take into account that we will also discover that there is a 50 watts wireless charging feature, even though it lacks magnetic absorption. Additionally, it includes reverse wireless charging, which allows you to charge certain devices on the back of this cell phone, helping to maintain the battery's health. Moreover, it features smart charging and a charging lock, ensuring that the device remains undamaged if you configure it properly. This holds true even if you leave it charging overnight or keep it plugged into the power continuously. In this particular case, we find that it supports 5G networks and it also offers the option to block mobile data for specific applications. Additionally, it supports 7 Wi-Fi networks, which means it can achieve very high download speeds. Interestingly, it appears that it does not support eSIM, which seems quite unusual for a high-end device. Perhaps in China there might be a different method to activate it, or maybe it's not as common there, I'm not sure. The truth is the option doesn't show up, which is disappointing for me. We will also find Bluetooth 5.4, the latest version, and NFC for mobile payments. Obviously, it lacks FM radio, but it supports OTG to connect various accessories via its USB-C port, so that you are able to connect HDMI adapters to project the screen using a cable. This is in mirroring format. Additionally, wirelessly, you can make projections a bit more advanced with features like hiding notifications. projecting with the screen turned off, or even projecting just a single individual application. It doesn't have desktop mode like Samsung DX, for example, so in this sense it falls a little short of the experience. But as for proprietary technologies developed by OPPO, it is interesting because it includes Beacon Link, a technology that is present globally, which is basically make calls via Bluetooth. Useful when you are, for example, in a camp and there is no mobile signal and you want to avoid shouting because it does not have a very long range, but at least it is a way to communicate easily when there is no mobile signal. It also brings OPPO Share, which also supports the new iPhone sharing feature. By installing the app or connect on some iPhone, you can simply bring the devices close together and thus enable the option to share images or videos. The truth is very well implemented and is a way to try to break the Apple ecosystem so you can interact with other cell phones, although I insist the application must be installed on the iPhone. In China, it includes satellite connectivity specifically for emergency situations, when there's no mobile signal and you need to send a message to someone far away. This feature allows you to do just that, which is fantastic. However, I must emphasize that it connects exclusively to Chinese satellites, so this option isn't available when you are outside of China. Now, regarding your sensors, we found absolutely everything we could ask for, although it does not bring pressure sensor, which we can find in some other flagships, but the proximity sensor is completely physical. One last thing to note on this block is that it has infrared, something that several high-end devices do not place. So if you can use this device as a universal remote control configured with your TV or some other devices. OPPO's ecosystem is very strange. Globally, it is more limited. In China, it is more widespread. Its catalog of the products are great, including headphones, bracelets, watches, and tablets. Additionally, they offer technologies such as Multi-Screen Connect, which allows you to operate your cell phone directly from your computer. This feature lets you manage your phone effortlessly. You can also share the clipboard and interact easily by just bringing your cell phone close to a compatible tablet or laptop. This seamless integration enhances the user experience significantly. The reality is that around the world, OPPO tends to prioritize Google services over their own developed services. Therefore, in this Chinese version, instead of finding Google services like Google Drive, Google Home and others, you will come across several alternatives provided by OPPO. They even offer their own cloud service, giving you 5 GB for free, with an option to upgrade to more advanced plans for additional features. Once more, I find it puzzling why OPPO chooses not to provide its own services worldwide and instead depends on Google. OPPO has its own wallet application, its own app store, and even a roaming service that assists us in purchasing data plans while traveling. It also offers many other Chinese services that we can't fully grasp due to language barriers. However, the reality is that the OPPO ecosystem appears to be significantly stronger in China compared to its global presence. Hopefully, OPPO will soon enhance its services to reduce reliance on Google outside China. Let's evaluate the performance of the OPPO Find X8 Ultra, which is equipped with the Snapdragon 8 Elite Extreme Edition processor. It also includes 8GB of LPDDR4X RAM and 512GB of UFS 4.1 storage. Now, ready? As you can observe, it took 1.5 seconds on average, which is definitely ultra fast. Now, let's check how it performs with the 16GB of physical RAM, which should undoubtedly assist it in performing completely smoothly without us witnessing any reboots or anything like that. As a China version, it can have issues with Google Play Store, but take note of that. The applications are not restarting, every single one of them is running. It was expected, it is a device. This RAM is substantial and appears well optimized. It's very fast, ensuring no lag. We've seen that it opens apps quickly and sharing and browsing within these apps will be smooth. Thus, there's honestly not much to complain about here. It's anticipated that a full-fledged flagship device won't present any issues when we're navigating through its apps. Of course, if there are any delays, it will likely be due to the internet connection. However, it's important to point out that the device itself operates at a very rapid pace. In fact, besides having 16GB of physical RAM, it also provides an option for virtual RAM expansion, which can go up to an extra 12GB. And here, it is performing an intelligent analysis to recommend a specific amount for you. The storage capacity is 512GB, which is obviously what one would expect in an Ultra device. It's important to note that it also includes excellent features to help clean up this storage. So here it provides you with the burst photo selection feature. Additionally, it allows you to save the original photos to OPPO's own cloud known as Hatop Cloud. and then you can have smaller copies stored on your devices. Once again, we global users miss out on another benefit due to Google. In addition, here we will also find tools like WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook Debugger. You can browse files individually by various categories for deletion. It also includes duplicate file analysis. Therefore, the storage optimizer is indeed quite comprehensive. Keep in mind that we are going to encounter UFS version 4.1 storage. Let's conduct this test to see the potential speed of this small chip. The read speed is 3701 megabytes per second, and the write speed is 3483. It's incredibly fast for installing applications or exporting video, tasks that need both reading and writing. It's quite efficient. However, as I always say, let's proceed to the real-life test. Our project is ready. We'll export in 4K at 30 FPS. Now remember, we're using clips from this phone that total a specific duration, lasting 1 minute. These were recorded in 4K, and that sums it up. It took a total of 16 seconds, even though my stopwatch isn't displaying the number clearly. But indeed, there it is, 16 seconds. Honestly, this is an incredibly fast device with an abundance of power, perfect for handling such applications. Regarding the games, we will locate the wizard itself, which will show us all the installed content. As you can observe, this version is distinct from the global version. In this particular instance at the top, we will discover the games that we have installed. Certainly, if you install it directly from the OPPO store itself, we would likely see some different animations or other elements. This is because it also suggests installing other content from the Chinese store. Here we can see game events and access the gameplays. Note the button to adjust performance for pro gamer or energy saving profiles. You can also select the screen refresh rate and response speed of the screen. Additionally, we are going to find intelligent network acceleration by using 2 SIM cards. Moreover, there is an option to block calls, which includes notifying you about repeated calls. Furthermore, there is also an option to block notifications, helping you avoid interruptions. We also find the GPU settings, allowing us to choose the level of graphics detail we want. There are other specialized options related to the visuals of our games. Additionally, there's a button to optimize game startup and cache them for quicker launches next time. However, let's explore some of this content further to discover additional options. As you may notice, when you launch the game, a small side panel appears. This panel is different from the global version and contains various categories. For instance, there's the Performance tab, which provides some information about the cell phone status along with profiles and different selectors. Let's delve into these details to understand them better. For instance, we have the option to select Hyper HDR graphics. While they are compatible with certain specific games, what these graphics do is transform the visuals. If you notice any difference, and you likely will, and if you aim to play with much more realism, you'll see, for example, that the clouds appear significantly brighter, and the areas where the sun is positioned will also seem more luminous. This enhancement truly improves the visual experience in a completely realistic manner. Additionally, there's an option for hyper resolution, which enhances detail levels, making your games look more detailed, unlike on other phones. The touch response is also included, all within this performance section. Then we have the tools, where we notice once more a bit more information about the cell phone status. This includes brightness control, as well as an option to enhance the game wizard by adding some icons and rearranging them in a different way. We find the network optimization buttons and the notification styles. As you know, we can choose between 2 notification styles and response options. First, let's see the default notification style. Observe by default, a traditional bubble with slight transparency appears, which might interrupt you while playing. Let's now switch up the style a bit. Here is another one that appears to be bubbles. However, in this instance, it still looks the same. This is because in this Chinese version, the notifications that are altered are solely for the messaging application and the game assistant. Interestingly, you cannot add other applications to make their notifications appear in this style. I found that to be quite intriguing and curious. Next, we locate a cleaning button that will effortlessly remove unused items from the RAM. Furthermore, we have the option to capture games, which presents us with 2 more features. Firstly, concerning screenshots, we discover the traditional ones. These are live akin to live photos, meaning it captures a static image. It also includes a brief video segment, providing a dynamic element to it. Then, when it comes to the screen recordings, we have the choice to decide if we want the microphone audio included or not, and we opt not to have it. What really caught my attention is that you can have this recording in retrospect. You can choose whether you want it to capture the past 15 or 30 seconds during which the device will have been recording. before you press the button. If you made a brilliant move and then press the button, it will capture the seconds leading up to that moment, ensuring you get the best shot. You even have the option to add a watermark of the OPPO Find X8 Ultra, and in case you wish to flaunt that you're using this particular device. Then we encounter our own profile, which certainly in China is likely to offer you some rewards and similar benefits for your games. Finally, here it provides the option to run certain apps in a floating mode. However, as you might have noticed, several of these apps are in Chinese. In this section, we can edit to add more applications. For instance, in our case, we would add WhatsApp, so you can observe how we can open it without exiting our game. So, I believe it provides us with several fascinating tools. While it may not reach the level of a device specifically designed for gaming like Red Magic, it still offers some excellent options. In Call of Duty by default, it has a very high graphics quality. At the maximum rate, we can achieve the highest quality, but if we aim to reach the ultra rate, the quality adjusts to an average level. This behavior is consistent with what we observe in all flagship devices. And naturally, it fully supports every special effect you could wish for, ensuring the ultimate visual experience. The overall feeling has been exceptionally positive. There were only a few minor dips when descending, but after those moments, the device performed remarkably well and stayed impressively cool. In this initial test, it maintained an average of 60 frames per second as we prioritized it. Regarding the graphic quality, it performed excellently. Even screen recording worked smoothly, with no complaints. Then we prioritized the refresh rate, and in this instance the experience was once more very excellent. On average, it ran at 120 frames per second. The game feels smooth and stable, with no frame jitter. Even when we recorded the screen for 5 minutes, the temperature stayed remarkably low. It seems to have maintained excellent cooling. The manufacturer claims a proprietary system called Tiangong with dual high performance graphite layers and a large vapor chamber, though the size isn't specified. It seems effective as the device stays cool. Note, however, that screen recordings aren't at a high bit rate. I believe it's an excellent gameplay quality, even when set to the highest definition, which equates to 16 megabits per second in Full HD. For highly dynamic games, movements might not appear as sharp. However, I insist that requirement is quite demanding, and I believe cell phones still don't provide high-quality recordings for gameplays. Then we played Genshin Impact. From this point on, we turned on high-performance mode. By default, it is set to high quality. However, for the purpose of the test, we increased it to a very high quality, setting at 60 frames per second with extremely high blurring. Once more, the device performed exceptionally well. Again, we set it to 60 frames per second with very high blurring, and the device performed remarkably well. At 60 frames per second with very high blurring, the device continued to perform outstandingly repeatedly. At 60 frames per second with very high blurring, it showed excellent performance. On average per second, the lowest peak was only 55 frames per second. So, you will notice that the visual experience has been quite impressive. You can also observe the advanced effects, making the experience truly excellent for a high-end device deserving of the Ultra name. It is indeed extremely powerful and is supported by effective cooling. You can truly enjoy long gaming sessions without any issues, as this game only reached 39.3 degrees Celsius just barely. We played Guttering Waves. Default is balanced. We set it to ultra high resolution, up to 60 frames per second with effects at the highest possible level anyway. We put the most demanding test we could to see how it behaved in this regard. And look at nothing else. The performance was absolutely brutal, averaging 115 frames per second with the lowest peak being 94. There was actually another low peak of 60, but it was simply when displaying the menu, so we didn't count that one. The device was ultra fluid, but we noticed the temperature was too high. In this case, the level of animations, graphics, visual effects and more are extremely complex, so in this case it heated up to 47.6 degrees Celsius on the external cover. But here, the interesting thing is that in reality the device did not lose any performance, but it kept good fluidity overall. Interestingly, during screen recording there was a moment of complete freezing. We were pushing very complex graphics. We haven't tested this game on devices fully dedicated to gamers yet, but this phone will satisfy gamers even though it's not specifically designed for gaming. Then we played Kark Street, raising all the quality to the maximum again, even putting the frames per second without limit to see what it was capable of, and in this case it could not go up to 120 frames per second, which I would have liked, but it reached 60 frames per second on average without problems. In fact, we came from having played a content that had resulted in excessive heating, but this time it was able to cool down at a considerably better speed compared to our previous test. In this instance, we conducted a complex test featuring numerous advanced effects, and the temperature only reached 40.2 degrees Celsius. Honestly, it performed excellently. We played Bright Memory at 120 FPS with max settings, and the experience was intense, especially due to the excellent use of the vibration engine. Precise, intense, and when playing it feels more professional. Then combine its excellent performance with an amazing screen, good sound, and a solid vibration engine, making the gaming experience truly very good. Although it should be considered that this game on the Galaxy S25 Ultra, for example, if it reached up to 120 frames per second, in this case it seems that the manufacturer could limit exchanging some content performance for improved stability. It's a minor detail, but the device excels in gaming. In conclusion, it definitely competes in the top 3 of the best cameras in a cell phone. The photos come out spectacular from different focal lengths, it behaves very well, it has a lot of software to take advantage of and different capture modes. But it is not only good at taking pictures, the experience is really what you would expect from a flagship. We found a very good screen, good level of IP69 resistance, a nice design. Being an Ultra, I like that it does not sacrifice other things in exchange for being thinner, although despite having a battery of 6100 milliamps, for some reason it seems that OPPO still does not optimize very well. At least in my tests, it still does not come out at the level of what one would expect. That is, in some tests it gave the same performance or even lower than other devices with smaller batteries. But anyway, despite the fact that the battery isn't outstanding, the video recording capabilities will still be quite impressive, and the overall performance will also be quite impressive. It's truly exceptional. This is an incredibly fast device, especially when it comes to gaming, where it performs excellently. Therefore, the flagship experience it provides is genuinely fantastic. But are you aware of what its primary weakness is? The fact that it is exclusively available for purchase in China. We can only hope that OPPO will soon take the initiative to offer the Ultra version beyond the borders of China. It would be wonderful to experience and enjoy all the extensive features and capabilities that an Ultra device from this brand has to offer. For a moment, we have reached the end of the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell us about it. And we'll see you next time.